Christmas night was supposed to feel warm, but it didn't. The cold air bit through Ethan Miller's jacket as he stood near the back door of his mother's house, holding a paper plate in his hands. Inside, the living room glowed with lights, laughter, and the smell of food. Outside, the porch light flickered, and the wooden chair beneath him felt hard and unwelcoming. Ethan hadn't argued when his mother, Linda Miller, told him to take his plate outside. She said it calmly, like it was a normal thing. Her voice was low but firm, the kind she used when she didn't want a scene. She glanced at the guests in the dining room and then back at him, as if he were something embarrassing. Ethan nodded and did as he was told. Growing up, he had learned that silence was safer than fighting back. Inside the house, his brother Ryan was telling a loud story about his new car. His sister Melissa laughed, glass of wine in hand, enjoying every second of attention. Linda smiled proudly at them, like she always did. Ethan watched through the glass door as if he were a stranger looking into someone else's life. He sat down and stared at the food on his plate. The turkey was already cold. His hands shook, not just from the weather, but from the weight in his chest. He tried to eat, but every bite felt heavy. He could still hear his mother's words from earlier in the evening, sharp and cutting, spoken without a second thought. She had said he never amounted to anything, that he always dragged the family down, that people would feel awkward seeing him at the table. No one defended him. Not once. Ethan had worked since he was a teenager. Long hours. Late nights. Jobs that left his back sore and his hands rough. He never asked his family for money. He never complained. Still, in their eyes, he was the one who didn't measure up. The one who didn't make them proud. A burst of laughter came from inside, and the sound hit him harder than the cold. He lowered his head and focused on his breath. He reminded himself not to react. Not tonight. He had learned that reacting only made things worse. As he reached into his coat pocket for his gloves, his fingers brushed against something folded. He paused for a moment, then slowly wrapped his hand around it. His face stayed calm, but his heart began to pound. He didn't look at it. He didn't need to. Just knowing it was there was enough. Ethan finished his meal quietly. When he stood up, no one noticed. He set the empty plate on the railing and took one last look through the glass door. His mother was laughing now, unaware of the line she had crossed for the final time. Without saying goodbye, Ethan stepped off the porch and into the night, carrying his silence with him. Ethan learned very early that love in his house was not shared equally. As a child, he watched his mother's face light up when Ryan walked into a room. Ryan was praised for everything, his grades, his sports, even his mistakes were called learning moments. Melissa came next, always dressed nicely, always encouraged to dream big. Their wins were celebrated loudly, with smiles and hugs. Ethan stood quietly on the side, waiting for his turn. It rarely came. When he brought home good grades, his mother barely looked up. She would say he could do better, then turn her attention back to Ryan or Melissa. If he tried to talk about his interests, he was told to be realistic. Dreams, in Linda's eyes, were meant for the other two. Ethan was expected to simply get by and not cause trouble. Money was another reminder of where he stood. Ryan got help with college. Melissa's needs were always met without question. Ethan worked after school, then full shifts during summers. He paid for his own clothes, his own books, his own small comforts. When he was tired, no one noticed. When he struggled, no one asked why. As he grew older, the distance only widened. Family gatherings became quiet tests he always failed. If Ryan mentioned a promotion, everyone listened. If Melissa talked about her plans, they applauded. When Ethan spoke, the room went silent or someone quickly changed the subject. His efforts were invisible, and his struggles were treated like personal flaws. Linda often compared him to his siblings, never in his favor. She said he lacked ambition. She said he didn't try hard enough. The words settled deep inside him, shaping how he saw himself. No matter how many hours he worked or how much responsibility he carried, it was never enough to earn her approval. Ethan stopped asking for it. He learned to keep his head down and rely on himself. He took jobs others didn't want. He learned to stretch every dollar. He didn't complain when life was hard because complaining had never changed anything before. He told himself that being independent was a kind of strength, even if no one else saw it that way. But silence has weight. Each small dismissal added up over the years. Each joke at his expense, each cold look, each reminder that he didn't belong. He carried all of it quietly, pretending it didn't hurt. Deep down, though, he wanted one thing, to be treated like he mattered. That was why the moment on the porch cut so deeply. It wasn't just about one night or one meal. It was the final proof of what he had always known but never wanted to accept. The cold grew stronger as the night went on. Ethan pulled his jacket tighter, but it did little to stop the chill from settling into his bones. The porch was quiet except for the faint sound of laughter drifting through the glass door behind him. Every laugh felt sharp, like it didn't belong to him. He kept his eyes on the dark yard, but his thoughts wouldn't slow down. His mother's voice replayed in his head, clear and unforgiving. The way she spoke to him earlier had been calm, almost polite, which made it hurt more. There was no anger in her tone, just certainty. As if she truly believed he deserved to be pushed aside. Through the door, he could see shadows moving. People leaned close to each other, whispering. Every now and then, someone glanced toward the porch. Ethan knew what those looks meant. He had seen them his whole life. The looks that asked silent questions, the ones that judged without needing words. Ryan walked past the door once, a small smile on his face. He didn't look surprised. Melissa followed soon after, laughing softly, her eyes flicking toward Ethan for a brief second before turning away. Neither of them said anything. They didn't need to. Their silence said enough. Ethan felt smaller with every passing minute. He wondered how it had come to this. How he had become someone it was acceptable to ignore, to embarrass, to treat like an inconvenience. The thought pressed down on his chest until it was hard to breathe. He stood up and paced the length of the porch, trying to warm his legs. His hands were stiff from the cold. He rubbed them together and stared at the door again. Inside was light, warmth, and family. Outside was him. For the first time, something shifted inside him. It wasn't anger, not exactly. It was clarity. He saw the situation for what it was, without excuses. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a bad moment. It was a choice they had made, and it was one they would keep making as long as he allowed it. Ethan stopped pacing and stood still. The laughter behind the door continued, but it no longer held the same power over him. He felt tired, deeply tired, but beneath that was a steady resolve. He realized that staying silent did not mean accepting everything forever. He took a slow breath and made a quiet promise to himself. This night would not define him. This would be the last time he allowed himself to be treated as less than he was. No more waiting for approval. No more standing on the outside, hoping to be invited in. When he finally sat back down, his posture was different. He wasn't just enduring the moment anymore. He was closing a chapter. Weeks before Christmas, after a long and exhausting shift, Ethan had stopped at a small convenience store on his way home. His body ached, and his mind felt empty. At the counter, the cashier asked if he wanted a lottery ticket. Ethan almost said no. He never played, and he didn't believe in luck. But something made him nod. He handed over a few dollars, folded the ticket, and slipped it into his coat pocket without thinking much about it. Days passed, and the ticket stayed where it was. Work filled his time. Sleep came late and never felt long enough. The ticket became just another forgotten thing in his pocket, like loose change or an old receipt. On the porch, with nothing but time and cold air around him, his hand moved to his coat again. He was searching for warmth, for something familiar to hold. His fingers brushed against the folded paper. For a moment, he hesitated. Then he pulled it out. He unlocked his phone and opened the lottery website. The numbers were still there from the draw earlier that day. He compared them slowly, one by one, his breath steady, his mind calm. The first match made him pause. The second made his chest tighten. By the third, his fingers began to shake. He checked again, telling himself he was tired, that his eyes were playing tricks on him. He lined up the numbers once more. Every single one matched. His heart began to race. The noise from inside the house faded into nothing. All he could hear was the rush of blood in his ears. He stared at the screen, then at the ticket, then back at the screen. He counted the numbers again, careful and slow, afraid to miss something. The amount displayed made his stomach drop. It didn't feel real. He sat perfectly still, afraid that moving would break the moment. He pressed his thumb against the ticket as if it might disappear. A strange calm settled over him. There was no urge to shout. No smile spread across his face. Instead, he felt grounded, clear-headed. For the first time that night, the cold didn't seem so sharp. Ethan folded the ticket carefully and slid it back into his coat. He locked his phone and rested his hands on his knees. Nothing about his expression changed. Anyone looking at him would have seen the same quiet man sitting alone. He knew this was not something to share. Not yet. Not with them. This was his, and for now, it would stay his secret. Ethan stayed quiet for the rest of the night. He did not knock on the door. He did not ask to come back inside. He finished what was left on his plate, even though the food had lost all warmth. Each bite felt slow and heavy, but he forced himself to finish. When he was done, he wiped his hands, stood up, and left the plate behind. He walked away from the house without a word. The door stayed closed. No one came after him. Inside, his absence barely caused a pause. Linda noticed he was gone and shook her head, believing she had done the right thing. In her mind, he needed to learn how the world worked. She told herself that he would be better for it, that a little embarrassment might push him to improve. The thought comforted her. Ryan laughed about it later, making quiet jokes with a guest about Ethan being too sensitive. Melissa rolled her eyes and said he always overreacted. Their words were careless, thrown around without concern. None of them thought about where he went or how he felt. To them, the night continued as planned. Ethan drove home in silence. The road was empty, and the streetlights passed by in a steady rhythm. His face stayed calm, but his mind was focused. He did not rush. He did not celebrate. He knew that acting too fast could ruin everything. Over the next few days, he moved carefully. He took time off work, telling no one why. He researched quietly and made sure every step was done the right way. He found a lawyer who specialized in protecting privacy and followed every instruction given to him. There were documents to read, forms to sign, and decisions to consider. He approached each one with patience. Ethan understood something important. The power he held did not come from proving anyone wrong in a loud moment. It came from choice. He could decide what to say, when to say it, or if he would say anything at all. For the first time in his life, he was in control. He continued his routine as if nothing had changed. He went to work. He paid his bills. He answered family messages with short, polite replies. No one suspected a thing. The people who had looked down on him felt comfortable doing so, unaware that the ground beneath them was slowly shifting. Ethan did not feel anger. He felt steady. He was building something quietly, step by step, and he was in no hurry to reveal it. Time passed, and the memory of Christmas faded for everyone except Ethan. For his family, life moved on as if nothing had happened. For Ethan, every day felt different, even though he acted the same on the outside. The first call came from his mother. Her voice was tight, filled with complaint rather than concern. She talked about rising bills and unexpected expenses. She said things were hard and hinted that a good son would help without being asked. There was no mention of the night she sent him away. No apology. Just expectation. Ethan listened. He kept his answers short and neutral. He said he would think about it. Linda sounded annoyed but not surprised. She had always believed he would step in when needed, no matter how he was treated. A few days later, Ryan reached out. He acted friendly at first, asking how Ethan had been. Then the reason for the call came out. He wanted money. He said it was just a short-term loan, something small to get him through a situation he didn't explain. His tone carried confidence, as if Ethan owed him. He joked about how Ethan never spent much anyway. Ethan stayed calm. He said he couldn't help right now. Ryan's voice changed immediately. The friendliness disappeared, replaced by irritation. He made a comment about Ethan being selfish and ended the call quickly. Melissa contacted him next. She spoke smoothly, choosing her words carefully. She said she was thinking about new opportunities and wondered if Ethan knew anyone who could help her. It wasn't a request so much as an assumption. She spoke as if his time and effort were hers to use. Again, Ethan gave no promises. He said he was busy. The conversation ended politely, but the message was clear. They expected access to him, to his effort, to whatever he had. None of them asked how he was doing. None of them reflected on their own behavior. They reached out only when they wanted something. The pattern was obvious now, clearer than it had ever been before. Ethan felt no surprise. Instead, he felt understanding. This was how they saw him. Useful when needed, invisible when not. Their belief that he had less made them bold. They spoke without care, without respect, convinced he had no choice but to comply. He ended each conversation the same way, with calm words and firm limits. He did not explain himself. He did not defend his decisions. He simply stepped back, watching how quickly their patience wore thin when he stopped giving. With every call, his resolve grew stronger. He saw the truth without emotion clouding it. This was not family reaching out in love. This was entitlement, shaped by years of looking down on him. Ethan invited his family to dinner on a quiet evening. He kept the message simple and said he had something important to share. He didn't give details, and he didn't explain why he wanted to meet. That alone made them curious. They arrived expecting nothing good. His mother looked around the place with a critical eye, noting what she thought was lacking. She made small comments about space and furniture, her tone sharp but casual. Ethan greeted her politely and showed everyone to their seats. Ryan smirked as he sat down, making a joke about Ethan finally playing host. Melissa laughed softly and added a comment of her own, light but pointed. They spoke freely, comfortable in their belief that they were above him. Dinner began, and the conversation stayed shallow. Linda asked questions that felt more like judgments. She spoke slowly, correcting him on small details, reminding him of how things should be done. Every sentence carried the same message, she still saw him the same way. Ethan listened without reacting. He poured drinks, passed plates, and stayed calm. He didn't rush to speak. He didn't interrupt. He let the room fill with their voices. Ryan talked about his plans, confident and loud. He brushed past his recent troubles as if they didn't matter. Melissa spoke about her ambitions, expecting approval. Both of them slipped in remarks about Ethan, half-jokes that carried old weight. Linda joined in when it suited her. She commented on how far the others had come, how proud she was of them. When she spoke to Ethan, her tone shifted. She offered advice he hadn't asked for and criticism he didn't need. Ethan noticed everything. The ease with which they spoke. The way they assumed his role in the room. He stayed quiet, nodding when needed, allowing them space to show exactly who they were. The tension grew slowly. It sat in the pauses between sentences and in the way Ethan held his composure. He could feel their expectations pressing in. They believed this dinner was another chance to measure him and find him lacking. When the plates were cleared, Ethan finally sat back in his chair. The room went still, not because he demanded attention, but because something in his calm made them stop. They waited, certain that whatever he had to say would not change much. They were wrong. Ethan reached into a folder he had placed beside his chair. He opened it slowly and set a few papers on the table. His movements were steady, unhurried. He did not raise his voice or change his expression. He told them he had something important to explain. His tone was calm, almost gentle. At first, they barely listened. Ryan leaned back, arms crossed. Melissa glanced at her phone. Linda watched him with a look of doubt, already prepared to dismiss whatever came next. Ethan slid the papers forward and asked them to look. Linda reached first. As she read, her face changed. The sharp confidence she carried all evening faded. Her lips parted slightly, and her hands began to tremble. Ryan leaned in, confused. He grabbed a page and scanned it. His smile vanished. He read it again, slower this time, then looked up at Ethan as if waiting for a joke that never came. Melissa moved closer, eyes wide, her breath shallow as she tried to understand what she was seeing. The room fell silent. Ethan explained everything simply. He didn't brag. He didn't smile. He spoke as if he were sharing facts, not delivering a victory. His words were clear and direct. Each sentence landed quietly but heavily. Linda sank back in her chair. Color drained from her face as realization set in. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The certainty she had carried for years cracked in front of her eyes. Ryan stared at the table, shaking his head. He laughed once, nervously, then stopped. There was nothing to say. Melissa pressed her hands together, her earlier confidence gone. She looked at Ethan as if she were seeing him for the first time. Ethan finished speaking and waited. He did not rush the moment. He allowed the silence to stretch, to settle into the room. It was thick and uncomfortable, filled with everything they had never said and everything they suddenly understood. No one spoke. No one argued. There was no anger in Ethan's voice, no satisfaction on his face. That made it worse for them. There was no mistake to correct, no insult to throw back. Just truth. The weight of their past actions pressed down on them all at once. The jokes. The looks. The night on the porch. Every moment they had dismissed him came rushing back, now impossible to ignore. Ethan gathered the papers and placed them back into the folder. He sat quietly, his hands resting on the table. He didn't need to say anything else. The room had already gone still.
Ethan looked around the table, seeing the shock and confusion on their faces. He spoke quietly but firmly, making sure every word was heard. He told them that he would no longer let anyone treat him with disrespect, that he would not give money, favors, or access to people or opportunities to those who had been cruel. He explained that love without respect was not love at all. It was control, manipulation, and entitlement. No amount of family ties could justify treating someone as less than human. He said he had spent years being patient, working hard, and staying silent, but that time was over. Linda's hand shook as she listened. Her eyes filled with tears, but she said nothing at first. She tried to speak, to justify her actions, but Ethan held up a hand. He was not going to argue or be drawn into excuses. He had given them years of chance after chance, and they had chosen to ignore him. Ryan and Melissa shifted uncomfortably. They realized that their joking and demands were no longer tolerated. Ethan's calm strength made it clear that nothing they had done before would be overlooked. He was not angry, but he was unmovable. Ethan told them that boundaries were not punishment. They were protection, the minimum respect he expected in any relationship. He said that he had chosen to succeed quietly and that his success would not be a tool for anyone else's gain. Anyone who wanted to be part of his life had to meet him with honesty and respect. Linda began to cry quietly. For the first time, she saw the consequences of her actions. She realized how she had pushed him aside, humiliated him, and underestimated him. The years of favoritism, of taking him for granted, of expecting him to stay small, all came crashing into her awareness. Ethan did not react to her tears. He stayed calm, showing the dignity he had carried for so long. His point was not to hurt her, but to make her understand that her actions had consequences. Ryan and Melissa looked down at the table, uncomfortable and embarrassed. They saw, finally, that their casual cruelty had real impact. Ethan had waited long enough, and now he had control over his own life. They were no longer in a position to demand or manipulate. When he finished, Ethan sat back and let the silence settle. No one argued. No one tried to convince him otherwise. He had spoken clearly, calmly, and with authority. The room felt heavy, full of regret and realization. Ethan knew that setting boundaries was not easy, but it was necessary. He had learned that respect could not be earned through fear, guilt, or expectation. Only those who treated him with fairness and dignity would remain in his life. Everything else would stay outside, just like that cold porch years ago. Ethan sat alone in his home days later, looking out the window at the quiet street. The snow had fallen softly, covering the world in white, and for the first time in a long time, he felt calm. He thought about the events of the past weeks, the humiliation, the laughter from the porch, and the family who had taken him for granted. He realized that the strength he carried now was not from wealth or power, but from dignity. He had faced years of being overlooked and insulted, yet he never let anger control him. He had acted with patience and careful thought, proving to himself that he could rise without stepping on anyone else. Ethan understood that true revenge did not come from hurting others. It came from protecting yourself, setting boundaries, and refusing to allow people to diminish your value again. By staying calm and keeping control of his life, he had achieved what no anger or confrontation could have done. He thought about the lessons he had learned over the years. Self-worth was not granted by others. Respect had to be demanded quietly, not begged for. Silence could be more powerful than words. Waiting, observing, and acting at the right time could change the outcome without creating more pain. The porch incident, once a source of shame and anger, now felt like a turning point. It had shown him exactly what he would no longer accept. It had given him the clarity to decide how to live his life on his own terms. Ethan smiled softly to himself. He had independence, security, and peace. He had kept his integrity while navigating the betrayal and entitlement around him. He knew that the past would always exist, but it no longer had the power to control his emotions or his choices. He also understood that forgiveness and understanding were different from allowing harm. He had forgiven the world for underestimating him, not by saying so, but by living beyond their judgment. He had proven his value quietly, without seeking attention or approval. Looking forward, Ethan felt confident. He knew how to protect himself, how to set limits, and how to hold his head high regardless of what others thought. His life was now his own, shaped by his actions and decisions rather than by others' cruelty. He reflected that anyone facing humiliation or betrayal could find strength the same way, through patience, careful thought, and self-respect. Revenge, in its truest form, was not a dramatic act, but the quiet knowledge that you would never be diminished again. As Ethan leaned back, he felt the weight lift from his shoulders. The cold nights, the mocking voices, the moments of doubt, all were behind him. He was free. He was strong. And he was finally at peace.